Calvin Brooks had been driving trucks for 23 years. He'd hauled everything from refrigerated produce to industrial equipment, crossed 48 states, logged over 2 million miles, and never once missed a delivery deadline. At 51 years old, he was what the industry called a lifer, someone who understood the rhythm of the road better than the rhythm of home. His rig was a Freightliner Cascadia, midnight blue, with a 53-foot dry van trailer. The cab smelled of diesel, coffee, and the faint mustiness of a space that doubled as both office and bedroom. A small TV mounted above the sleeper berth. A mini fridge humming quietly. Photos of his daughter taped to the dashboard. She was 24 now, living in Oregon, working as a veterinary technician. Calvin saw her twice a year if he was lucky. On October 17, 2024, Calvin picked up a load at a distribution center outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The manifest was simple: 1 crate, marked as industrial equipment. Destination a warehouse in Scranton. Total drive time, 2.5 hours. Easy overnight run. He signed the paperwork at 6:47 p.m., just as the sun was sinking behind the ridgeline. The dispatcher, a heavy-set man named Lou, handed him the delivery slip and a sealed envelope. "What's the envelope?" Calvin asked. "Special instructions from the shipper. Don't open it unless there's a problem." Calvin nodded and tucked it into the visor. He'd seen special instructions before, usually just corporate liability nonsense or temperature requirements. He climbed into the cab, started the engine, and felt the familiar rumble beneath him. The diesel hummed, steady and powerful. Calvin adjusted his mirrors, checked his lights, and pulled out of the lot. The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark. Calvin settled into the drive. He had his routine: coffee in the thermos, classic rock station on low, CB radio scanning occasionally for traffic updates. The road was his meditation. The hum of the engine, the rhythm of the pavement, the endless white lines, it all quieted his mind in a way nothing else could. By 7:30 p.m., he was on Interstate 81, heading north. The sky had turned a deep indigo, stars just beginning to emerge. Traffic was light. A few cars, the occasional semi. Calvin passed a truck stop near Carlisle and considered stopping for fuel, but his tank was 3/4 full. He'd wait. At 8:12 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from dispatch: * road construction ahead on 81. Expect delays near Hazleton. Alternate routes available, *. Calvin frowned. Construction at night? Unusual, but not unheard of. He checked his GPS. The Dieter would add 30 minutes. Not ideal, but manageable. He keyed his CB radio. "This is Blue Freight, northbound 81. Anyone got eyes on that construction near Hazleton?" Static. Then a gravelly voice. "Yeah, Blue Freight. They got the northbound lanes down to 1. Backup's about 5 miles. You might want to take Route 209, east and loop around." Calvin considered it. Route 209 would take him through the mountains, narrow, winding, but scenic. He'd driven it before, years ago. Copy that. Thanks for the heads up. He took the exit for Route 209 at 8:41 p.m. The change was immediate. The interstate's wide lanes and bright lights gave way to a 2-lane rural highway. Trees pressed in on either side, their branches forming a canopy overhead. The road curved gently, following the contours of the hills. Calvin switched off the radio. Reception was spotty out here, and drove in silence. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the center line and the reflective eyes of deer watching from the shoulder. At 9:03 p.m., he passed a sign: Briar Hollow, 15 miles. Calvin didn't recognize the name, but rural Pennsylvania was full of small towns he'd never heard of. He kept driving. The road began to climb, winding through dense forest. The trees were old here: oak, maple, pine, their trunks thick and gnarled. Fog began to settle in the low points, drifting across the road in thin sheets. At 9:27 p.m., Calvin saw headlights in his rearview mirror. Another vehicle, a mile or so back, moving at the same speed. He watched it for a moment, then returned his attention to the road. At 9:34 p.m., he passed another sign, Briar Hollow, 12 miles. Calvin frowned. He'd been driving for over half an hour. The distance should have decreased more than that. He glanced at his GPS. The screen showed a blue arrow, his position, on a blank gray background. No roads. No landmarks. Just empty space. Great, Calvin muttered. No signal. He wasn't worried. GPS could be unreliable in the mountains. He'd just follow the signs. At 9:51 p.m., he passed a third sign, Briar Hollow, 15 miles. Calvin hit the brakes. The truck slowed, the engine downshifting with a growl. He stared at the sign in his rearview mirror as it disappeared into the darkness. 15 miles. The same distance as the first sign. That wasn't possible. Calvin pulled over to the shoulder and put the truck in park. He grabbed his phone. No signal. He checked the GPS again. Still blank. He sat there for a moment, listening to the idle rumble of the engine. Outside, the forest was silent. No wind. No birds. Just the faint hiss of fog drifting past the windows. Calvin keyed his CB radio. This is Blue Freight on Route 209. Anyone out there? Static. He tried again. Blue Freight calling any station. I need directions to Briar Hollow. More static. Then faintly a voice. Briar Hollow, burned down long time ago. Calvin's pulse quickened. Say again. You're breaking up. The voice didn't respond. The static returned, low and constant. Calvin set the radio down and stared out the windshield. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, empty, dark, disappearing into the fog. He took a deep breath, put the truck in gear, and started driving again. He didn't know it yet, but he'd just crossed a threshold he wouldn't be able to cross back. Calvin drove for another hour, watching the mile markers carefully. But the numbers didn't make sense. He passed marker 47 twice. Marker 52 appeared before marker 50, and the signs for Briar Hollow kept repeating. 15 miles, 12 miles, 15 miles again. At 10:48 p.m., he saw lights ahead. A gas station. Relief washed over him. He pulled into the lot, gravel crunching under the tires. The station was old, a single pump, a small convenience store with a flickering neon sign that read gas food, open 24 HRS. Calvin parked near the entrance and climbed out. The air was cold, thick with fog. He could hear the distant sound of water, a stream, maybe, hidden somewhere in the woods. He walked into the store. A bell chimed overhead. The interior was dimly lit, the shelves half empty. An old man sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. Evening, Calvin said. The old man looked up. His face was weathered, deeply lined. His eyes were pale, almost colorless. Help you? The man asked, his voice rough. Yeah, I'm trying to get to Scranton. Took Route 209 to avoid construction, but my GPS isn't working. Can you point me in the right direction? The old man folded his newspaper slowly. Scranton. You're a ways off. How far? Depends on which road you take. Calvin waited for more, but the man just stared at him. Okay, Calvin said. What's the fastest route? The old man stood and walked to the window. He pointed down the road. You keep going the way you were headed. About 10 miles up, there's a turnoff. Unmarked. Dirt road. Cuts through the state forest. Takes you right to the highway. A shortcut. Fastest way from here. Calvin hesitated. It's not on my map. Old logging road. Most folks don't know about it. Calvin looked out the window. The fog had thickened, obscuring the far edge of the lot. Is it safe? I'm hauling a big rig. Road's wide enough. Just follow it straight. Don't turn off. Calvin nodded slowly. All right. Thanks. He bought a bottle of water and a bag of chips, more out of habit than hunger. As he paid, he glanced at the old man's newspaper. The date on the masthead, October 17th, 1984. Calvin blinked. That paper's 40 years old. The old man didn't look up. Only paper I got. Calvin left the store unsettled. He climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. As he drove away, he glanced in the side mirror. The gas station was gone. Just dark trees and empty road. Calvin's hands tightened on the wheel. He told himself it was the fog. Visibility was bad. He'd just lost sight of the lights. But deep down, he knew better. At 11:09 p.m., he found the turnoff. The old man was right. It was unmarked. Just a narrow dirt road cutting into the forest. Calvin hesitated, then turned. The road was rough but passable. The truck rocked over ruts and uneven ground. Tree branches scraped against the sides of the trailer, a sound like fingernails on metal. Calvin kept his speed low, about 15 miles per hour. The headlights barely penetrated the fog. The trees on either side were dense, their trunks close enough to touch if he reached out the window. At 11:23 p.m., the radio crackled to life. Calvin jumped, startled. He'd turned it off earlier. A voice emerged from the static. "If anyone can hear this, please respond. We're trapped, can't find a way out." Calvin grabbed the handset. "This is Blue Freight. Who is this?" The voice didn't respond. Instead, it repeated the same message. "If anyone can hear this, please respond." Calvin tried again. "What's your location? Do you need help?" The voice cut off abruptly. The static returned, loud and harsh. Then, beneath it, Calvin heard something else. Laughter. A child's laughter. Calvin turned the radio off. His heart was pounding. He drove in silence, focusing on the road. But the laughter stayed in his head, echoing. At 11:41 p.m., he saw headlights in his rearview mirror. Another vehicle. Close. Maybe 50 yards back. Calvin watched it. The lights didn't move. They just stayed there, a steady glow in the fog. He slowed down. The lights slowed down. He sped up. The lights sped up. Calvin keyed his CB radio, despite having turned it off. "Vehicle behind me on the logging road. Identify yourself." Static. "This is Blue Freight. Who are you?" The static shifted, becoming something else. A voice. His voice. Asterisk, "This is Blue Freight. Who are you?" Asterisk. Calvin's blood ran cold. The voice on the radio was his own, repeated word for word, with the same inflection, the same tone. He dropped the handset. The lights behind him were closer now. He could see the outline of a truck, another semi. Dark, its shape distorted by the fog. Calvin pressed the accelerator. His truck lurched forward, bouncing over the uneven road. The lights behind him matched his speed, staying exactly 50 yards back. He drove faster. 40 miles per hour. 50. The road was barely visible, but he didn't care. He just needed to get away from whatever was following him. At 11:58 p.m., the lights disappeared. Calvin glanced in the mirror. Nothing. Just darkness. He slowed down, his breath coming in short bursts. His hands were shaking. And then, from somewhere behind him, he heard it. A loud metallic bang, like someone striking the trailer with a hammer. Calvin hit the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop, the trailer fishtailing slightly. He grabbed his flashlight and climbed out. The fog was so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead. He walked along the side of the trailer, shining the light on the metal panels. No damage. No dents. Nothing. He reached the back of the trailer and checked the lock. Still secure. Another bang. This time from inside the trailer. Calvin froze. He pressed his ear against the door. Silence. Then, faintly, he heard it. A tapping sound. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Tap. 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 Calvin stepped back, his pulse hammering. He grabbed the lock and yanked it open. The door swung wide. The trailer was empty. Just bare metal walls and the single wooden crate, strapped down in the center. Calvin shone his flashlight on the crate. It was about 4 feet long, 2 feet wide, unmarked except for a shipping label that had been torn off. He approached slowly. The tapping had stopped. Calvin knelt beside the crate and listened. Nothing. He stood and backed away. then closed the trailer door and locked it. As he returned to the cab, he noticed something. Fresh scratches on the side of the trailer. Long, deep gouges in the paint, as if something with claws had dragged across it. But there was nothing out here. Just trees and fog. Calvin climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and started driving again. He didn't look back. Calvin drove until 1:17 a.m. The dirt road seemed endless, twisting through the forest with no signs, no mile markers, no indication of where it led. His fuel gauge was at half. His phone still had no signal. The GPS remained blank. He was lost. Completely, utterly lost. At 1:23 a.m., the radio turned on by itself again. This time it wasn't static. It was a voice. Clear. Calm. Asterisk Calvin Brooks. Asterisk. His name. Calvin stared at the radio. He didn't touch it. Didn't respond. The voice continued. Asterisk Calvin Brooks. You're not supposed to be here. Asterisk. Calvin's mouth went dry. Who is this? Asterisk. You need to turn around. Asterisk. I can't. The road doesn't go back. Asterisk. Then you're already too far. Asterisk. The radio went silent. Calvin sat there, his mind racing. Someone knew his name. Someone was watching him. He grabbed the envelope from the visor, the one Lou had given him at the distribution center. He tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. The ink was faded, the paper yellowed with age. It read, asterisk to the driver. If you are reading this, you have taken the wrong road. Do not stop. Do not open the cargo. Do not leave the truck after midnight. Follow the lights. They will guide you out. Do not trust the voices. They are not what they seem. Asterisk. J.M. 1984. Calvin's hands trembled. 1984, the same year as the newspaper. The same year the old man at the gas station had been reading. He looked at the cargo manifest. The crate was listed as industrial equipment. But there were no details, no weight, no description, just a destination, Scranton. Calvin set the paper down and stared out the windshield. At 1:44 a.m., he saw them. Lights, not headlights, something else. Small, flickering, like lanterns or candles. They appeared in the trees on either side of the road, dozens of them, moving slowly through the fog. Calvin slowed down. The lights moved with him, keeping pace. He stopped the truck. The lights stopped. He stared at them, his breath fogging the windshield. They were about 20 yards away, just visible through the trees. He couldn't see who, or what, was carrying them. One of the lights began to move closer. Calvin put the truck in gear and accelerated. The lights fell away, disappearing into the darkness. At 2:06 a.m., he passed a sign, Briar Hollow, 2 miles. Calvin's chest tightened. He was getting closer. But closer to what? At 2:19 a.m., the road widened. The trees thinned. And ahead, through the fog, Calvin saw the outline of buildings. A town. Calvin slowed to a crawl. The buildings were old, wooden structures, weathered and sagging. Some had collapsed entirely. Their roofs caved in, walls rotted. Others stood intact, windows dark, doors hanging open. A street sign leaned at an angle, Main Street. Calvin stopped the truck in the middle of the road and stared. This was Briar Hollow, the town that burned down in 1984. But it wasn't burned. It was just empty, abandoned. Calvin's radio crackled again. Asterisk Calvin. Get out of the truck. Asterisk. The voice was different this time. Female. Young. Who are you? Calvin asked. Asterisk. Get out of the truck. We need your help. Asterisk. Calvin shook his head. No, I'm not getting out. Asterisk, please. We've been waiting so long. Asterisk. Calvin grabbed the handset. Where are you? Show yourself. The static shifted. Then, faintly, Calvin heard it. Asterisk, behind you. Asterisk. Calvin spun around, looking through the rear window into the sleeper berth. Nothing. He turned back to the windshield and froze. A figure was standing in the road ahead. A woman. Young, maybe 30. She wore a long coat, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and hollow. She didn't move, just stood there, staring at him. Calvin's breath came in short gasps. He reached for the gear shift, and the woman raised her hand. She pointed behind him. Calvin turned. Standing beside the driver's side window, inches from his face, was another figure. A man. Older. His face gray and sunken. His eyes empty. Calvin screamed. He slammed the truck into gear and floored the accelerator. The truck lurched forward. The woman in the road didn't move. Calvin braced for impact, but the truck passed through her like smoke. Calvin stared in the rearview mirror. The woman was gone. The man was gone. The town was gone. Just empty road and fog. At 2:41 a.m., Calvin pulled over and vomited. Calvin sat in the cab, his head in his hands, trying to steady his breathing. His mind kept replaying what he'd seen. The figures, the town, the way the truck had passed through the woman as if she wasn't there. He didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in the supernatural, but he'd just driven through one. At 3:02 a.m., he heard it again. The tapping, coming from the trailer. Calvin grabbed his flashlight and climbed out. The fog had lifted slightly, the air colder. He could see his breath in the beam of the flashlight. He walked to the back of the trailer, his footsteps crunching on gravel. The lock was still in place, but the door was rattling. Gently, rhythmically. Tap, tap, tap. Calvin unlocked the door and pulled it open. The crate was in the center of the trailer, exactly where it had been. But now the wood was split. Not broken, split cleanly, as if something inside had pushed outward. Calvin approached slowly, his flashlight trained on the crate. He could see inside through the crack. Darkness. Nothing else. He reached out and touched the wood. It was cold, colder than it should be. The tapping stopped. Calvin stepped back. He was about to close the door when he heard a voice. Faint, coming from inside the crate. Asterisk, help me. Asterisk. Calvin's blood ran cold. Asterisk, please. I can't breathe. Asterisk. Calvin backed away, his heart pounding. Who's in there? Asterisk, please. It's so dark. Asterisk. Calvin ran. He slammed the trailer door shut, locked it, and sprinted back to the cab. He climbed in, locked the doors, and started the engine. He drove. Fast. Too fast for the narrow road, but he didn't care. At 3:21 a.m., he glanced in the rearview mirror. The trailer door was open, swinging on its hinges. Calvin hit the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop. He stared at the mirror, his breath fogging the glass. The door was open. He'd locked it. He was sure he'd locked it. Calvin climbed out and walked to the back. The lock was on the ground, broken. He shone his flashlight into the trailer. The crate was gone. Calvin stood there, frozen. The trailer was empty. No straps. No crate. Just bare metal. He heard footsteps behind him. Calvin spun around. Standing at the edge of the road, barely visible in the fog, was a figure. Tall. Dark. Holding the crate. The figure set the crate down gently, then turned and walked into the trees. Calvin didn't follow. He climbed back into the cab, put the truck in gear, and drove away. He didn't look back. Calvin drove until dawn, or what he thought was dawn. The sky never brightened. It just shifted from black to a dull, colorless gray. At 5:47 a.m., he passed another sign, Briar Hollow, 15 miles. Calvin slammed his fists on the steering wheel. No, no, I'm not doing this again. But the signs kept appearing. Every few miles. Always the same. Briar Hollow, 15 miles. The road looped. He was certain now. He was driving in circles. At 6:13 a.m., Calvin saw lights ahead. Not the flickering lanterns from before. Headlights. Real headlights. Relief flooded through him. He flashed his high beams and accelerated. As he got closer, he realized it was another truck, parked in the middle of the road. Calvin slowed down and pulled alongside it. The truck was identical to his. Same make, same model, same midnight blue paint. Calvin's stomach dropped. He climbed out and walked to the other truck. The driver's side door was open. The engine was running. The headlights were on. He looked inside. The cab was empty. But on the dashboard, he saw something that made his blood freeze. A thermos. His thermos. And taped to the visor, photos of his daughter. This was his truck. Calvin stumbled back, his mind reeling. This wasn't possible. He was in his truck. Right now, he was standing outside it. But here it was. Parked. Abandoned. He looked at his own truck, still idling behind him. It was gone. Calvin spun around. The road was empty. His truck had vanished. He stood alone in the middle of the forest, surrounded by fog. And then he heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Steady. Coming from the trees. Calvin turned. A figure emerged from the fog. Tall. Dark. Featureless. It walked toward him, its movement smooth and unnatural. Calvin backed away. Stay back. The figure stopped. Then it spoke. In Calvin's voice. Asterisk, I see the lights ahead again. They're waiting at the curve. Asterisk. Calvin's logbook. The last entry he'd written. The figure stepped closer. Calvin ran. He ran into the trees, branches tearing at his clothes. He didn't know where he was going. He just ran. Behind him, he heard the figure following. Its footsteps never hurried, never slowed. Just steady. Relentless. Calvin burst into a clearing and stopped. In front of him was the road. And on the road, his truck. Engine running. Headlights on. Calvin climbed inside, slammed the door, and locked it. He put the truck in gear and drove. At 7:02 a.m., he passed the sign again. Briar Hollow, 15 miles. Calvin screamed. Epilogue. On October 21st, 2024, 4 days after Calvin Brooks departed the Harrisburg Distribution Center, his truck was found on a dirt logging road in the Loyalsock State Forest, approximately 40 miles northwest of his intended route. The engine was still running. The headlights were on. The fuel tank was nearly empty. The driver's seat was empty. The trailer was empty. The cargo, one wooden crate marked as industrial equipment, was never recovered. Inside the cab, investigators found Calvin's logbook. The last entry, dated October 18th, 3:14 a.m., read, Asterisk, I see the lights ahead again. They're waiting at the curve. Asterisk. The dashcam footage was reviewed. The recording showed Calvin driving through dense fog on a narrow dirt road. At 3:12 a.m., he stopped the truck and climbed out, flashlight in hand. He walked to the front of the truck and stood in the headlights, staring at something off camera. Then he turned to the dashcam and spoke. Asterisk, if anyone finds this, I don't know where I am. The road keeps looping. I keep seeing the same signs. I think I've been here before. A long time ago. I just don't remember. Asterisk. He paused, listening to something. Asterisk, they're calling me. I can hear them. I think they've been waiting. Asterisk. He turned and walked into the trees. The camera continued recording for another 6 hours. At 5:47 a.m., a figure appeared in frame. A man. Tall. Dark coat. Walking slowly toward the truck. The figure stopped in front of the camera and looked directly into the lens. It was Calvin Brooks. But his eyes were empty. His face expressionless. He reached out and turned off the camera. The footage ended. Calvin Brooks was never seen again. The case remains unsolved. And on Route 209, late at night, drivers still report seeing a truck with its headlights on, parked on the shoulder. When they stop to help, the truck is gone. But sometimes, they hear a voice on their CB radio. A calm, tired voice, asking, Asterisk, can anyone tell me how to get to Scranton? Asterisk,